on this edition of The Fifth Estate.
Trump is definitely a wild card. We just don't know what's coming next.
Donald Trump's threatened tariff war has people on both sides of the border in a panic.
The golden age of America begins right now.
One day left! Look at this crowd! Woo!
But what is Trump's endgame?
The U.S. is dependent on much of what we produce in terms of the resources.
We're thinking in terms of 25% on Mexico and Canada.
Well, this is our sister city, Port Huron, Michigan. There's a big difference this time in the re-election of Trump.
President Trump's threats here, it's a bully tactic.
That 25% tariff is an existential threat.
Already, a distributor in Vermont is raising the prices in anticipation of there being a trade war with Canada.
Is there a bigger agenda at play?
It will have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it.
But it was a lie.
It's Make America Great Again. You can't get your economic growth by being an economic colony of the United States.
I'm Joanna Rumiliotis. This is The Fifth Estate.
We won. We won. Thank you very much, everybody. What a good feeling. We like winning, don't we? Huh? We're going to make our country greater than ever before. Hello, Washington, and hello, America.
Okay, I've got my pass. Thank you, Patrick. Okay.
All right.
I got an umbrella. Oh, it's not raining. Let's just see what's going on.
Inauguration is going to look very different this year, with Donald Trump ordering events inside because of the cold. Some things have been completely altered or scrapped, and you're not going to see those huge crowds out on the National Mall.
Hello, welcome, Kendall.
We have a call to make, and it is a state call, and it is a projection that CBC News is ready to make a call for Donald Trump in the great state of Pennsylvania.
Trump was re-elected in November 2024. The Republicans won control of both the House and the Senate, giving Trump levers of power he didn't have in his first presidency. Trump's mantra that America is the victim of bad trade deals became louder than ever.
Since the election, President Trump has been playing the old songbook, really. We're going back to what we saw in 2016 around this concern that if a country has what President Trump would say is a trade deficit with another country, then that's some sort of subsidy and some sort of evil thing that needs to be eliminated. Now, a trade deficit with another country simply means that the U.S. purchases more goods from Canada in value terms. In other words, they spend more buying stuff from Canada than we purchase from the United States. We're selling product into the U.S. that is globally competitive, and the U.S. wants to buy our product. And it's not a negative for them.
And then, of course, everyone in Canada is holding their breath for any details on any information on tariffs.
A tariff is essentially a cost to the importer by the government of that country for bringing a product across the border. In some cases, tariffs are applied for essentially to build up a nascent industry, but in most cases, they're just because we don't want to buy too much of a good that's more competitive, more productive.
Trump had campaigned on a promise to put the American economy first.
Now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath.
At the cost of its longtime trading partners.
Good evening. 3 nations, 3 economies, and 360 million people. Tonight, they share a powerful new bond, NAFTA.
Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. have long had a free trade agreement in place.
The agreement will eliminate quotas and tariffs on most goods and services traded between the 3 countries.
The original NAFTA agreement, North American Free Trade Agreement, was set up in the early 90s. In 2016, we had the threat of dissolving NAFTA. I think part of the political objective that President Trump in his first term was essentially to shake things up, create fear.
Shaking up NAFTA was what Trump promised in 2016, and he put tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, prompting Canada to impose tariffs of its own.
By the way, without tariffs, we wouldn't be talking about a deal. Just for those babies out there that keep talking about tariffs.
A trade war was averted when NAFTA was renegotiated. The deal was largely the same as NAFTA, but with a new name, USMCA.
Today, we're finally ending the NAFTA nightmare and signing into law the brand new U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. Very special.
But when Trump returned to the White House, he attacked the very trade agreement he pushed for. The flip-flop became fodder for late-night host Jon Stewart.
He did explain today why we're going after Canada.
I mean, I look at some of the deals made, I say, who the hell made these deals are so bad?
So bad. The trade deals with Canada, they're so bad. He's just looking and saying, who made these?
This morning, President Trump signed a new trade deal to replace NAFTA with the leaders of Mexico and Canada.
The best trade deal they say ever made.
One day left. Whoa, look at this crowd.
Yeah, I mean, we have never, at least in modern history, Adrian, experienced the kind of rhetoric and threats from our greatest trading partner that we have over the past number of months. Things that were thought to be jokes, turning us into the 51st state, quickly turned into language that was sort of shocking to many Canadians about economic annexation.
It's down now. I think we need to go down closer to that.
Shortly after his re-election, Trump started to frame the trade deficit with Canada as a subsidy. His solution? Canada should become the 51st state.
And tonight we're getting some new details about that Trump-Trudeau dinner from two people who were at the table. We are told that when Trudeau told President-elect Trump that new tariffs would kill the Canadian economy, Trump joked to him that if Canada can't survive without ripping off the U.S. to the tune of $100 billion a year, then maybe Canada should become the 51st state.
We can stand right over here. Let me know when you're ready, Johnny. Okay, tell me why you're here today.
Kamala wanted us to be socialists.
Is there one issue that stands out to you as to where you want to see the most change?
Housing prices, cost of living, it's just out of control. We're just looking forward to change and stop the wasteful spending.
I think that our freedoms and liberty have been under attack, and I think that Trump is going to save us.
Well, this is our sister city, Port Huron, Michigan. We do have a close relationship. That relationship has strained in the last couple of years with security and with Trump, and it's too bad.
Mike Bradley has been the mayor of Sarnia, Ontario, for more than 36 years. He says tariffs would have an impact on his border city.
You'll see behind me here, it's a constant flow of trucks back and forth between the two countries.
The threat of tariffs, it's really hard to get at how the thinking is evolving in the White House. Again, back to the economics books, free trade drives benefits for both parties. And it's been, essentially shown time and time again in the history books of how that's worked out. But President Trump doesn't seem to see it that way.
How does Trump see things? And where is his vision coming from? Coming up.
It is my honor and pleasure to introduce to you the 45th and the 47th President of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump.
I'd quit my job if I had to make this.
That connection, about to make America great again.
Are you for hire? Oh, taxi, we're getting in. Oh, you are a miracle. Hello, is this the Current?
So we're up in a minute and a half. I'm a foreign correspondent in Washington covering an administration that's taken a rather hostile position against Canada. There are so many questions to be asked.
I'm Matt Galloway, and this is The Current. Katie Simpson is the CBC's Washington correspondent. What is it like in Washington, D.C. this morning?
The city is largely on lockdown, and that is expected for major events like this. I'm actually talking to you from the back of a cab, and we're trying our best to drive around the perimeter to try to get me to an entry point so that I can go into the actual Capitol for today's event. Donald Trump did make one mention of tariffs. As a Canadian reporter, my ears always sort of are listening for, is there going to be a mention of tariffs? Because that could have such a huge impact on the Canadian economy.
On the Canada-U.S. border, Sarnia, Ontario is a critical link in the North American energy sector.
We understand times are changing. We have 3 of the major refineries in eastern Canada here. And all the product that comes from the west is refined here.
Trump's trade war could strike at the heart of Sarnia's economy.
Because we're so close to the markets, that's why it's here. We have about 60 plants, chemical plants between Sarnia and down the river.
In terms of the interconnection between the United States and the Canadian oil industries, they are functionally the same industry. Ontario gets the majority of its crude from Alberta and from Western Canada more broadly, but that travels through pipelines that are in the United States. Virtually all of Canada's oil travels through pipelines to the United States and is then refined by US refineries. This is really unique in the world global oil market because most major exporters, of which Canada is one of the top ones, they typically ship their crude to ports and then put it onto tankers, and those tankers travel flexibly around the world.
Whether it be the chemical industry, whether it be the auto industry, whether it be agriculture, anyone thinks that you could just shut it down and say we're going to do it on our side of the river and you do your thing on your side of the river is foolish. It just isn't possible.
Even in the current context of the debate among kind of national government and subnational governments and premiers about potentially, throttling exports to the United States, it's more complicated than that because to do so would actually also throttle the very crude supply that Ontario relies on and that fuels Sarnia.
Western Canada is the main producer of oil and gas in this country. Alberta is by far the largest. Almost all of its crude oil exports go to the United States. It's why Trump's tariff threats have put energy-related companies here on edge. So we gotta get this on?
Yeah, we have to put our safety gear on.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, I'll follow your lead.
The risk of the tariffs that we've been dealing with for the past few weeks now, they impact the cost of the price of oil that Canadians sell to the U.S. Our customers, the oil and gas companies that produce the oil that we drill for, sell that oil into pipelines. 3.2 million barrels a day of Canadian oil flows into the U.S. right now. There is no immediate replacement for that anywhere. There's no question that it's working very efficiently right now. Any other solution will cost Americans more money than what we have today.
Most exporters of crude have a very diverse array of clients. Whereas in Canada's case, come hell or high water, we really do have this kind of lock-in to the US market, and particularly into the US Midwest market. 95+% of Canadian crude goes to one single customer.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President-elect of the United States, the Honorable Donald John Trump.
The golden age of America begins right now. And we will not allow ourselves to be taken advantage of any longer. I was saved by God to make America great again. I will also declare a national energy emergency. We will drill, baby, drill.
President Trump talks drill, baby, drill, and making, kind of that protectionism kind of policy. Does that even make sense?
When I hear the political rhetoric around whether or not the U.S. needs oil or gas from Canada, it's political rhetoric.
I think overall, it's, drill, baby, drill is a catchy slogan.
The day he was sworn in, Trump made his intentions clear.
Well, we're thinking in terms of 25% on Mexico and Canada.
Certainly the uncertainty right now is a huge problem. When 2025 began, I would say that I had kind of fresh hopes for a new year and an administration in the U.S. that seemed to be focused on energy security. And when you layer in tariffs and impacting the Canadian industry, that seems to go against security for energy in North America. And it's just so hard to comprehend.
And it's not just oil and gas.
When we think about the energy sector, we have essentially hydroelectricity. This is a common grid.
The federal government says Canada exports enough electricity to the U.S. to power nearly 6 million homes, mostly on the American eastern seaboard.
It really doesn't matter at this point whether Trump goes through with his threat of 25%, tariffs charged against, as I said, one of our largest trading partners, certainly one of our closest friends, because we're already feeling the impacts in Vermont. I heard from a constituent this week. She had prepaid for home heating oil, and already her distributor in Vermont is raising the prices in anticipation of there being a trade war with Canada.
So why manufacture a trade crisis?
I mean, I think Donald Trump has some very clear economic objectives. What he is he's America first and make America great again.
Jeff Ferry was the chief economist for a Washington think tank that aligns with Trump's long-standing views on tariffs.
As I said, Donald Trump has believed this view about trade for at least 25 years. He wants to negotiate a deal with Canada and Mexico that will enable the U.S. economy to grow and to rebuild those industries that have been damaged by too much competition from Canada and Mexico.
Ferry's pro-tariff stance makes him an outlier among most economists. But like Trump, he says it's the way back to America's glory days.
Today, we have lots of young people coming out of high school and college without the same opportunities as their parents. Why are we so concerned with preserving jobs in China and Thailand and Europe and yes, Canada, when we don't have good jobs for people growing up here in the US? And so Donald Trump understands that, and he's basically giving them what they want, which is a more nationalistic economic and political policy.
Ferry is still consulting for the Coalition for a Prosperous America, one of more than 100 groups that contributed to a conservative manifesto called Project 2025.
Project 2025 is a 900-plus page document that was put together before the 2024 election. And it's really a plan for a new, what they call conservative presidency.
To some extent, the economics in Project 2025 are aligned with Donald Trump, yes.
How does Project 2025 play into President Trump's stand on tariffs?
I think it's really a red herring.
So what is the bigger agenda at play? Coming up.
And I have nothing to do with Project 2025.
Before Trump won the 2024 election, when news of Project 2025 came out, he sort of disavowed it. He said, I don't know what that is. I've never heard of it. He sort of, even though very many members of his first administration were authoring chapters, but it was a lie.
Donald Trump has fired the first shot in a trade war that is all but certain to bring economic misery to parts of North America. An economic crisis that could hit hard and fast and could see workers out of jobs and prices hiked in a matter of days. Canada's really in a state of limbo right now. Everyone's waiting to see if Donald Trump's going to actually make good on his tariff threats. He's written them down, put them in writing so people can make plans in case it does actually happen. This is where we voice, come on in. But it's creating this environment of instability where businesses don't know if they're going to actually have to deal with this or not deal with this. It's been more than 4 years since Washington hosted a pro-Trump crowd of this size. The last big draw was Trump's January 6th speech, which took place hours before his supporters stormed the Capitol. He said there was going to be this blanket 25% tariff on Canadian goods and then 10% on Canadian energy. Canadian officials were sort of able to escape that and they reached some sort of resolution around border security.
Canadian officials arrived in Washington at the end of January to try to head off tariffs. They were in the middle of making their case when Trump announced he would impose 25% tariffs on Canadian imports starting February 1st, citing border security concerns. The next day, Canada hit back.
Tonight, I am announcing Canada will be responding to the U.S. trade action with 25% tariffs against $155 billion worth of American goods.
Trump delayed those tariffs until March 4th. But days later, on the way to the Super Bowl, he announced he would impose additional tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum.
It'll be 25% for steel. It'll be 10% for aluminum.
The trade war was officially on.
So how to respond? Canadian political leaders at least are getting a little more aligned now, essentially apply counter tariffs that are very specific. I mean, if we can't apply broad-based tariffs, that would just hurt our economy more than the U.S. But if we are looking at targeted tariffs on specific goods, then maybe we can hit at pain points and pinch points.
And it's not just about, okay, we're going to implement these changes to, try to bring manufacturing jobs back, try to scare companies into building their plants in the United States. So in the long term, we have more manufacturing jobs. We're going to use it as leverage. We're going to use it as a way to get what we want.
Chaos is part of the strategy of confusing people, separating them from the facts and making them easier to control. If you can get people to believe a lot of little lies, you can get them to believe a big lie.
The general feeling is that things are very chaotic and confusing.
I think Project 2025 is actually the people who are going to make stuff happen in government. I mean, Trump is just a kind of chaos agent.
So what's behind the chaos? Is there a method to the apparent madness?
Canada has always been a very strong ally to the United States.
Are you Canadian television? Yes. Okay, here's what I would say. We love the people of Canada.
This is Peter Navarro, Trump's senior counselor for trade and manufacturing.
The people of Canada, please understand, it's like we need to protect and defend our aluminum industry. So when it comes time to put an F-35s up in the sky to protect Canada and us and others, we'll have access to those materials.
Navarro has been Trump's tariff whisperer since his first presidency. You might remember him for hurling insults at Trudeau after the Prime Minister pushed back at Trump over tariffs in 2018.
Chris, there's a special place in hell for any foreign leader that engages in bad faith diplomacy with President Donald J. Trump and then tries to stab him in the back on the way out the door.
Peter Navarro has long been an advocate of tariffs.
On tariffs, Navarro laid out his view that they will cure America's economic ills in a section of the conservative policy blueprint called Project 2025.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025.
Trump distanced himself from Project 2025 during the campaign, but the links are undeniable.
It was put together with the input of about 100 other think tanks and right-wing organizations. It's a sort of ideological backbone of the new Trump administration. And it includes chapters on almost every feature of government.
Of the 267 people who wrote parts of Project 2025, 144 worked in the previous Trump administration. Trump's new inner circle, from cabinet posts to special advisors, is again filled with Project 2025 authors. Among those in key positions are Russ Vought, regarded as the architect of Project 2025, who is now the director of the Office of Management and Budget; Brendan Carr, the head of the Federal Communications Commission; John Ratcliffe, the new director of the CIA; and Peter Navarro.
I know Peter Navarro. Peter and I are pretty much in agreement on every economic issue.
He's here, ladies and gentlemen. Please stand to your feet and greet my good friend and yours, Peter Navarro! Let's go, Miami! Let's go!
Some of Trump's most trusted allies participate in something called the Reawaken America Tour. Navarro has appeared. I've seen him at the Reawaken America Tour.
He's doing these Reawaken tours. Many of you have come to many of them. It's a really important way to reach the people of America, and this man is doing God's will here.
When you go to these events, you hear every conspiracy in the book. You hear that, the Great Replacement, COVID was a plot to control people. It's all about, the deep state and 666 and all this kind of crazy stuff. JFK is still alive.
Because this is what we need. The leaders that partnered with the Lord.
Navarro speaks at these events.
We're in a world where the information flows are controlled by a small handful of powerful media companies.
When it comes to tariffs as a form of economic nationalism, Navarro's position,
Right and left-hand guys right there, folks. There it is.
echoes what Trump has said for decades.
The United States is, if it were a corporation, it would be bankrupt. It's losing $200 billion a year. For years now, it's been losing that. What right do we have to go out and defend? Why aren't these countries, these wealthy money machines, paying us for the defense of their freedom and their nations? Why aren't they paying us?
I also want to point out that Donald Trump has been tremendously consistent. To some extent, the economics in Project 2025 are aligned with Donald Trump, yes.
Make sure that we, as conservatives, are prepared to hit the ground running January 20th, 2025.
There are competing views on tariffs in Project 2025, but Navarro's is winning out, and other contradictory forces in the document are finding common ground.
You know, this movement includes a lot of different groups, and some of them have very different interests and agendas in mind, but they're all kind of, for now, rowing in the same boat, as it were. But there are some real fissures that I think we can start to see. So I think, for instance, a lot of the billionaires funding the movement, the tech bros and the like, they're not really motivated by the Christian nationalist stuff. Like, they're not really motivated so much by some of those culture war issues, and they don't particularly care about same-sex marriage and things like that, but they almost view it as the price of doing business. They recognize that those are the issues that get the rank and file to vote a certain way. They're like, okay, well, I guess we get those things, but we need that in order to get the economic policies that we want.
Coming up, Canada reacts.
What I'd like to see, Canada become our 51st state.
I do like the O Canada, right? It's a beautiful thing. I think we're going to have to keep it for the 51st state. I call him Governor Trudeau.
I spoke to Governor Trudeau on numerous occasions, and we'll see what happens.
So all the premiers just showed up. We thought they were going to show up at 4 p.m., and guess what? They're here now.
We recognize fentanyl's a problem. It's a problem for us, too, and we're doing everything we can to make sure we stamp it out in our communities.
We'd be very keen to hear from you guys after when you guys come on out. We want to hear all about it. So,
in a show of unity, Canada's premiers brought their appeal against tariffs to the White House. They spoke with staffers, but left with no guarantees.
Canada will never be the 51st state. We don't want tariffs. Because we're so close together, it'll only raise prices.
Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew even tried to appeal directly to Americans in a TikTok video which has gone viral.
We know how to go for a beer together once the game is over.
Canada had already announced a $1.3 billion border plan to avert tariffs, but Trump recently announced he's going ahead with them anyway.
No, the tariffs are going forward on time, on schedule.
But it's more than a looming trade war rattling Canadians. It's Trump's repeated threats to Canadian sovereignty.
Let's be very clear. Conversations around a 51st state are a non-starter. It's never going to happen.
I think it's really distressing Canadian officials, at least the ones I'm talking to. And it's really distressing Canadians as well. I think that Trump advisors keep saying you have to take Donald Trump at his word. But the thing is, does Canada want to be a part of the United States? Absolutely not. So what's it actually going to take for that to happen? Is Donald Trump going to, get ready and send the military north and try to seize Canada? No, no, that's not going to happen. But really, it's just making Canadians more and more angry. Look at the booing of the national anthem.
For the land of the free.
From booing the American anthem to canceling U.S. vacations and buying Canadian, Trump's threats have triggered an extraordinary wave of patriotism.
The Buy Canadian movement has become a huge force in the last week alone, changing how and where people shop.
And when Canada defeated the U.S. in the Four Nations Cup final, a moment of national catharsis. But what happens now?
Trump is definitely a wild card, and I think that's part of the the difficulty in dealing with this is that we just don't know what's coming next.
We have this business where we're managing assets and owning the assets are capital intensive. We're in our mechanical repair shop, and behind the screen here we have a welder. I find myself looking at the news when I happen to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning to find out what might have been tweeted last night that might impact our industry. That keeps me awake.
In America, the impossible is what we do best.
The aim of the government should be to create an economy which helps people's incomes rise and helps create millions of jobs for everybody.
Make it great again, great.
And as I said, it's make America great again.
And so how realistic is the theory that the tariffs will bring back jobs that Americans actually want to do?
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't know for sure. The Americans have lost some of the work ethic that they had 50 years ago. And if your dad was able to buy the family a house when he was 28 years old on a small mortgage, you should be able to do the same. But instead, they're all living in their parents' houses, sitting on the sofa, and unable to get a job that pays much more than $500 a week. They feel extremely depressed and extremely unhappy. And we've lost millions of young men to their sofas and video games because we haven't been able to offer them productive jobs. The problem with our politicians is most of them come from upper middle class families. They went to some of the best schools, and they don't understand the struggles of people who are poor or working class.
And you think Trump, who's a billionaire, has a better insight into that?
Well, I think the election victory kind of proves it, right? The positions he has taken, he's taken them to win the election, and because he understands that the average voter cares about inflation, immigration, the cost of living, and making America great. I mean, that shows you the insight he has.
You know, Trump frames his policies as helping the little guy. But if you look at what the policies are actually doing, they're actually taking away the guardrails on unearned wealth. A real conservative organization would try to preserve institutions of value. They would want to preserve our most valued overseas alliances. But if you look at the larger agenda toward which they're working, I don't view it as remotely conservative. It is radical. It is absolutely radical.
But what does this mean for Canadian-U.S. relations?
Look, you are an ally. Politically and militarily, you are an ally. You can't get your economic growth by being an economic colony of the United States. Each country has to pursue its own economic welfare.
Watching the back and forth debate on tariffs and the ongoing negotiations and the uncertainty has been just unsettling.
But when you look at these young recruits and you consider the fact that they might be at risk because of these tariffs, what goes through your mind?
It's a really sad part of this industry where some outside factor, which is really unrelated to energy, could put their jobs at risk.
President Trump's threats here, it's a bully tactic.
It's like sleeping next to an elephant. Every time they move, we feel the impact. And that's what's happening here. And to have your biggest partner turn on you, it makes you very, very anxious for our future.
Here's the question, is it really going to work? I mean, as the cost of goods and services goes up as a result of these needless trade wars, as our government stops working, as people are unable to access services that they need or deserve, is this really going to make America better?